Yeah.
I will take a motion to approve the minutes of October 23rd, 2023.
Second.
David?
So moved, Davis.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All, I'm going to be a little spacey today. All who say no, say no.
Opposed.
Mark abstains.
Opposed, thank you. Okay.
Jamie abstains as well.
Okay. So it passes with 2 abstentions. For those just joining, I'm a little out of it today. I've been in bed since Wednesday, but we're going to push through this. So if I pause with my memory more than usual, that's why. Public participation. Public comments is not legally required, but we believe it is crucial for us to hear from our community members about their concerns over issues. Through these meetings, our board models for our students how to conduct public discourse, and that the board and members of our community can approach controversial issues in a civil and constructive manner and can demonstrate mutual respect. Having said that, please note that the board is here to listen. The public comment period is not designed for discussion. Please start by identifying yourself and what town you reside in. Are there any public comments? And if you are not commenting, please mute. As there does not seem to be any public comments, we are going to move on to the administrative report. I'll say right off, it's my understanding that we do have an executive session, so I'm going to be pretty tight on time tonight. So, Christine, take it away.
Tracy's listed first on the agenda. Is it okay if I pass it to her first?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. I can start my video here if that's helpful. Hey everyone. It feels kind of weird just to jump in and be like, hey, let's talk about intersectionality, but I think we will just for the sake of time. So last session, similarly, 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, however long we talk about this is definitely not a lot of time to talk about intersectionality. It's a big topic, so I just want to preface that with that. And a reminder, just care for yourselves in whatever way you need to if anything comes up for you. No shaming or judgment around whether or not you got to any of the work or the requested pre-work. If you didn't, I can share those links again. But maybe we can just start with intersectionality as a theme, as a topic, as a word. What do you know about intersectionality? What is it? Or what do you think you know about it is okay too.
I thought it was all the traits that describe you, all those different little things that make you a whole.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Intersectionality.
Yeah, I really, first of all, thank you for those. They were short clips, I wish homework was always like that, quick, but I mean, to the point, I really appreciated those little videos. It was also nice that they were people that were able to speak to their own intersectionality. And I really, there was a part of me that really enjoyed or really appreciate intersectionality, because it just really doesn't, you're not a woman, but you're this and that. As Nancy said, it's all of these qualities about who you are, and it makes you kind of like feel like, oh, yeah, this is important. This is me,
Right.
and also unique. This is me. This is, I'm different than my friend Nancy here, and these are the unique qualities that I have, and she has her own. So I really appreciated that, just recognizing that. about people.
Love that. That's great. Yeah, so much uniqueness. I mean, and while you and Nancy may both be women, right? I mean, there are lots of things that make you unique that are all these other parts of your identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, appreciate
I did your bubble thing.
Oh, you did?
Oh, I
Nice.
wanted to do the bubble.
I had 6 more bubbles and I could have put, you know, they're just, it really makes you think when you start with those bubbles.
Yeah, I'm glad you did that. Thank you for that. And Elizabeth, I think I saw your hand somewhere.
Oh,
Are you there?
thanks. I was just, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I was just going to say that often people start off thinking that intersectionality is like, you know, the different hats that you wear as a human, but it's really not, because so it's not just a tally of your traits or the pieces of your identity, because some of them are multipliers. And that's I think, an important distinction to make.
Yeah. Elizabeth, would you mind sharing just a little bit more about that? What do you mean by multipliers?
I mean, just as the very first video suggested, if you're Black and you're a woman, you have, it's not just two separate traits. Both of those traits combined is not, both of those traits combined is not necessarily twice the marginalization. Sometimes it's 3 times the marginalization. It can be a multiplier and not just an adder. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you for that. So compounding definitely can be compounding aspects.
Yeah, I think to me the intersectionality is definitely the term that makes the most sense, but I think that almost interactionality, right? Because it's how all these different aspects of your identity, all these different, all these different identities that we carry interact and multiply or contribute to one another, and you know,
Absolutely.
can add up. Yeah, no, and Elizabeth put it very well.
They don't stand alone.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, it's no one of us can really show up as any one part of who we are, right? So within the theme of thinking about belonging, right? I mean, I know last time we talked about race and racism, and I know that there are people who think like, oh, DEI is only about race, and it's not only about race, right? It's about all of the ways that our identities make us who we are, and the way that society has sort of set up an arrangement for how we navigate society based on our identities. And so when I think about it, it allows us to see so much more, right? And I was sharing with Christine today that, you know, there was somebody who was telling me a story about they were a planner, and so they were building a new building somewhere. This was in Oregon, and they were thinking about how do we make sure that this building is safe, that people feel safe here. So who do you think they would want to ask? About lighting, about cameras, like who do you think, what kinds of identities do you think they might want to ask? Or find somebody with what kind of intersecting identities who could shine a light literally on safety for this building?
I mean, anybody who could conceivably use the building.
Yeah, but who do you think might be most vulnerable? Who's gonna give them information that you may not get from somebody else?
I think older people and people with disabilities.
Great, yeah. And I think those were, I don't even know if those were folks who I imagine they did. They were thinking like Black trans women, like who are people who don't feel safe somewhere? And the thing about thinking about intersectionality is when we think about how are we centering people with most marginalized identities, because their perspective is actually going to contribute to a solution that works for everybody. Right, because in that case, whoever they ask about safety for the building is actually going to benefit everybody else who uses that building. Somebody who doesn't live with any sort of fear isn't going to be able to give them that same kind of information. So intersectionality can help us really understand and navigate like the nuances of things around us. So I realized I was going to share an update of where we are. I'll jump back to that because I want to just walk through a couple slides, and I think I can. Let's see if this.
You want to share?
Let's see if this will, well, actually, if you don't
I don't know. I
mind,
have it
because
ready.
I feel like it does something
Yeah.
funky sometimes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
And so, to start too, intersectionality wasn't always a thing, right? I mean, it was in who we are and our uniqueness and the ways that our identities intersect, but it was really meant to respond to something that was missing within the legal system. There were women, I think there was a small group of women who were Black women who worked for General Motors back in the 80s, and they felt like they were experiencing discrimination both as women and as Black people. But the law didn't actually have a way to, like, you couldn't sue them for discrimination against Black women. It had to be discrimination against Black people or discrimination against women. So before, Kimberly Crenshaw was the one who's credited with really coining this term. Before that, you couldn't actually.
We turned it off.
I did that once.
I just don't
We
know
all
what
do
people
it.
do.
Yeah, all do
I
it.
did
Just
that
say
last, at the last meeting, I did that.
I got you. I just put the volume system down.
Thank you.
So in our case, right, it's like, so these women weren't able to actually file a lawsuit for the unique experiences that they were having. They couldn't be seen as both women and Black people at the same time. Yes, Elizabeth, I see you.
Thank you. If I'm not mistaken, I know in our state, that it still holds, that all of our discrimination laws at the moment still have to be pursued one by one, and they can't be pursued intersectionally. And it's a tremendous frustration for some people. But I believe that our HHB, our hazing, harassment, and bullying laws are exactly the same. That if a student has an intersectional identity, that they still have to be pursued. I mean, they still have to address bullying at separate identities. Just as if they're ganged up on by more than one student, they have to address bullying by each separate student.
That's really interesting. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
It's really unfortunate, but that's where we are.
Yeah, so like the points about, I think that you made about, like, you can't just tease one part of your identity apart from the rest of who you are, right? And so in this case, Elizabeth, that you're describing, it's like we don't get to actually do that, to be seen in our unique experiences of our intersecting identities. That's really interesting. Yeah.
And I think that's that's the challenge for education on some level. I think that's the challenge, because I don't think many of us really see ourselves with all of these unique parts. We're talking about it now only because we're talking, but we don't see that. And so I think that's part of the challenge in education. How do you really teach that?
Yeah, and what does that mean? Yeah, what does that mean? How does it inform and influence? Yeah.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah.
One thing I thought was particularly interesting and salient about a couple of those videos is it pointed out that there's also more or less necessity to be constantly aware of those identities, depending on what identities you have, based on how you can navigate the world, right? Like I don't have to think about my whiteness a lot because I don't get a lot of pushback in almost every space that I'm in.
Right.
And that's, whereas if I had a different racial or ethnic identity or, visible gender or sexual identity, those things change, but they're compounded with all those other identities. So that I think it was the first, the claymation video really put that very clearly.
Which I think is an interesting thing, because we tend not to think of sort of the dominant culture or identities as much, like you're saying, right? And I think one of the points of intersectionality is I know we've talked a lot about the ways in which marginalization in our identities can be compounded. The same is true for the ways that maybe some identities that we hold that are privileged can also experience compounding, but we don't always name that or talk about it, Yeah,
I mean, the dynamics are different. It's another way to look at it is the framework of kind of norming versus othering, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have identities that are more in line with the dominant culture, those are considered norms versus things that are not or others, and how those fit into an intersectional framework are going to, the way that you experience the world is going to be somewhat different.
Yeah. All All right, great discussion. Let's scroll through a couple of slides. So if you can skip over the first couple and let's just go through to, I think, keep going. We'll maybe come back.
It's just all the work
to
she's been doing. She's skipping over.
Right.
She's doing great work.
No
I'll
big
say that out loud.
I'll maybe come back to that. So intersectionally, you can keep, Audrey Lorde talks about there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives, right? Same conversation that we're talking about. And how about the next one? Again, rooted in the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, intersectionality looks at the ways our identities overlap. I think did I share one of the videos where she's really standing in an intersection, or someone standing in an intersection and talking about the way the cars literally are coming through an intersection? There are more videos. I think there's another short one, so I'll share that with you. So it can be, compounding experiences of oppression, privilege, or maybe a mix of both, right? Like I walk through the world as somebody I'm a white, I'm a woman, I'm Jewish. So at any given time, right, all of those identities are kind of intersecting in different ways. Okay, so the next one, we also tend to think about intersectionality as sort of like a deficit way, but we can think about it as like these unique aspects of our identity can offer greater perspective. So what do y'all see on the screen here? Yeah, it's kind of hard to see. It's a little flower, but if you go to the next slide, it enhances the whole picture, right? So this is like the ways in which our inner identities may intersect can offer, right, more perspective. Which means that we also get to benefit from people who are living in different intersectional lives because it increases our own understanding and our awareness and perspectives too. Okay, I think there are a couple more.
It's like a marriage. These two people have to join with all the.
So many dimensions.
You learn so much from each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or you learn you don't want to be there.
Right. So Mia Mingus, if you don't know them, I believe they use them, but I'm not positive. Is an intersectional advocate, activist, amazing. But says here, intersectionality is not just talking about places you're oppressed, also places you have privilege. It's me having to choose between the People of Color Caucus, the Disability Caucus, the Asian Pacific Island Women's Caucus, or the Adoptee Caucus, right? It's like breaking apart all these aspects of who she is. It's thousands of LGBT and queer folks coming out for Pride, but only 150 coming out for Transgender Day of Remembrance, right? So it's what does it mean? Where do we find sort of where it's okay to experience or uplift certain identities, and where is that not happening? So again, it helps with our perspective. And the next slide is this was something someone I used to work with, she used to talk about it like a cheeseburger, right? Like you can't have a cheeseburger or a cheeseburger deluxe. You can't have that without the cheese, without it's got to have all of the things, and that's what makes us who we are, all the ways it intersects. And the way it helps us really understand things in a more nuanced way, if you go to the next slide, I know I had always had this understanding, right, that like women make 77 cents to the dollar was what I thought I understood about women and how we compared to men in terms of what we made. But can anyone see anything on the screen that you might be able to notice? What do you notice about this graphic?
Oh, the graphic.
You can
Different intersectional identities, when we look at it in terms of compensation, there's an impact.
Right, yeah, women.
There's a disparate impact.
Yeah. And there's some interesting things, if you spend some more time on this, you can probably tease out a little bit more, but like kind of to your point about the normal, right? Here, it just says women overall earn, but nowhere does it say what white women earn specifically. It says what Black women earn, what Native American women earn, what Latinas, and we also know no one group is a monolith. So within any one of these groups, there's a huge range. For Asian American women, there is a huge range for how much they're making, again, compared to dollar the white man. So it helps us understand the nuances of issues that are big and complex. Like the next one, if we just thought about the right to vote as like, oh, like all women got the right to vote in 1920, but that's actually not true. White women got the right to vote in 1920. And so there are all these ways, again, it helps us understand things, and it helps us actually name what's happening. instead of just lumping everything together. Because if we did that, and when we do that, it's not really, I mean, so actually that's interesting when we think about HHB, and Elizabeth, what you shared about, like, so what are we not noticing? What are we not able to actually track because we have to see things as being separate? What are we missing in that? The next two slides also, so this one talks a little bit, this next one, another story I feel like I have held is that the middle class is disappearing, that we're losing the middle class. But if you look at this graphic, it's about it's showing that the middle class is being impacted, but depending on who you are and what racial identity you have, according to this, it's just breaking it down by white, Latino, and Black, which also maybe there's some other questions, right? Like, why is it only broken down by that? But if you can see, white people are actually are gaining in middle class. This is like overall what household wealth trends in the United States show that white middle class folks are actually gaining a little bit. So kind of holding on to middle class. Where you see like overall Latino and Black populations, it's actually decreasing the household wealth. And the next slide shows that there are predictions, like with the way that the wealth divide is happening, that by the year 2053, the median Black household wealth is going to hit 0. And by 2073, the median Latino household wealth hits 0. So this is different, right? Then I know the narrative I have is just that the middle class is somehow disappearing. This is showing that there are different impacts based on our racial identity. And you could probably break that down even more, right? By all different kinds of things, and maybe you see, anyway, you can see a little bit more in how it shakes out when you do actually layer in the nuances.
I've never seen these statistics.
Yeah, it's pretty alarming.
Yeah.
And so these are the things, like when people, especially like in our community, who talk about, can't we talk about socioeconomics and not talk about race? Can't we talk about something else and not talk about race? It's like, let's talk about all of it. I mean, I find in places where I've worked before this have mostly been founded by people of color who, like, they lead with race because race is the most difficult thing for us to talk about. And it is a factor in everything. So if we can lead with race through an understanding of intersectionality, then we get like a more complete idea of what's happening or what's not happening. So I think that's all I got, and probably about all the time I have. I know I kind of bypassed some of the things that are happening, and they're in the slides. So just, I'm gonna pause.
For me, I wonder, as a board member, as someone that is trying to help understand, make sure, or support our educational institutions, prepare our students for the world that we not only live in, but that we're living in. My question becomes, how is this sort of information shared in the school? And because it's one thing to have this discussion, okay, but what are students in kindergarten and first grade and second grade looking at, hearing, seeing when they go into classrooms, into schools, into what are they seeing on the bulletin boards?
Yeah.
Has it really changed, or is it pretty much the same? And yet the world is changing, and yet all of this is happening, and so and yet they're graduating, and we think, oh, we have a 80% graduation rate. Yeah, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah.
That we have an 80% graduation rate. What are our students walking away from here?
Yeah. And there are students, one of the updates I was going to share is that students in Heartland, middle school students, want to do an audit of their building to see who's being represented, who's not, and how are they.
That is powerful.
So there are things,
So
and they came up with that on their own as something they wanted to do, which is really cool. And Bill, yes, I see you. Are we at time? Are you?
Yes, I'm going to. I was kind of planning to do a transition here. So
Okay, go for it.
basically, very fascinating and an interesting fact, but how this impacts our work on equity is the simple fact that the single greatest indicator of earning potential is education. And so when we look at how we can impact the disparity in earning potential is through educational equity, so that those who are from marginalized groups have the same educational opportunities as those who aren't of those groups. So that's my transitional comment. So take it away, Christine.
All right, it's Brittany next. Here we go, switching.
Still not Christy.
Still not me. I'm going last.
She's doing a really good job of delegating. Yeah.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Hold on a second, I did something wrong. Share this tab instead. Okay.
Perfect. So I'm going to present a little bit about a little data for you tonight. So feel free to ask questions. I believe this was shared with you ahead of time. So hopefully you had a little time to look at it. I wanted to let you know as we get started that all the data was pulled from our new data warehouse called EduClimber. That's an amazingly powerful system. We have a group of staff that are kind of becoming experts in the system and are helping us customize it so that when we roll it out to all of our staff next year for our data meetings, data discussions, MTSS, documentation systems, all of those kinds of things, it will be all set and ready to go. So they're working really hard on that. So that's where we're kind of pulling all of our data from. So go ahead. The presentation is organized by our strategic plan goals so that hopefully we can really stay focused on the things that we're working on. Oh, now I have to move my tab. Hold on.
Sorry.
There we go. No, we were all good. Okay. So I know it's so small, but hopefully, I can kind of explain a little bit about what you're seeing here. So we adopted Renaissance Star this year, which replaced Track My Progress for reading and for math. We're giving this assessment K through 10. However, a couple of things you'll notice on this. STAR has an early literacy assessment for grades K1, 2, depending on our reading level for our students. So that's why our first grade is so low, because beginning of the year, many of them took the early literacy assessment instead of the STAR reading assessment. It's a little bit more basic. It helps us with our dyslexia screening, all of those kinds of things. But coming up, we'll see a lot more students in first grade taking the STAR reading assessment. And our kindergarten did not take the assessment. We don't have them take computer-based assessments at the beginning of the year. We do a lot more teaching, getting to know the classroom kind of things, and then later in the year, we'll kind of worry about that piece. So it doesn't mean that they're not kind of being assessed by the classroom teacher. Obviously, we want to know where they're at, but they're not going to be given a computer for those assessments. The graphs are all done by number, not by overall percent. So you can see we had a really big 8th grade group across the board. And then our 9th and 10th grade are lower because just by sheer numbers. Go ahead to the next one. How come I lost this? This one is a little bit more confusing. So I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain this. So again, our kindergarten did not take it because they'll take it in the winter time. But our K through 8 group, those standards and the way that assessment is done ranges. They can go all the way down to kindergarten. They can go all the way through 8th grade, all of those kinds of things. So it doesn't matter what grade level they're in. They're being assessed at wherever they're at. Our 9th and 10th grade is a little bit different. So the way STAR does it, once you hit 9th grade, they expect that you are in algebra. And when you hit 10th grade, they expect that you're in geometry. Our students are slightly different than that. One, they're being assessed at the end of the year standards. So even if they are in algebra, they may not know enough to be able to do well on that test. So we use it as a growth measure. So hopefully in the winter, we're gonna see these numbers shift a little bit. The other piece is we were able to use this data as well as our Vermont State testing data to really analyze, what are our students missing? Why are they not getting more algebra skills before they get into 9th grade? Some of that is, we've done a lot of backward planning and saying, oh, our students are coming in, they're not quite ready, so we're gonna, give them prerequisite skills and then move them on, which has caused some of them to take classes that are a little bit lower than the algebra level. So in order to address that, Kate was gonna be here to talk about that a little bit, but she filled me in. I know she's not well today. So in order to address that, Kate and Colleen are working really hard to provide coaching for some of our teachers, specifically in the area of math at middle and high school. And then they are doing a lot more collaboration between our middle school and our high school, because obviously the curriculum is not going to go middle school all the way through high school. When they get to high school, it's a little bit different. So we need to try to figure out what that continuum is going to look like. What standards do we need to make sure that we're hitting in the middle school level in order to make them more successful at the high school level? The goal right now is that any student who takes algebra will be put into algebra and geometry when they come into high school, which is not necessarily the case currently. So that's the ultimate goal, and that's what they're working towards.
Maybe I just have a question about that, and that is, you're right, students normally are leaving middle school and entering high school and should be going into algebra. Can you give me an idea of how many of our students are not able to go into algebra because they're
Not ready.
not at
Not
that
ready.
level? Not ready?
I don't know the exact number. Kate would know that number. So I can certainly, maybe Christine and I can remember to talk to Kate and get you that
Yeah.
number. I'm not sure exactly.
And I was just wondering
Yeah.
if that's an issue, with, Kate and Colleen are working, would it be good to be able to look at over the next couple of years?
Definitely.
And we should be looking at it from middle school.
Yeah.
We should be able to get that data for our students that have choice and go to other schools, whether or not they're moving into algebra.
That's
So-
very helpful also, yeah.
Yeah, and the now with our students who are taking the STAR data, but EduClimber does a longitudinal study within the system. So as we get all this information in, the more data we have, the more we're able to run that, and it'll analyze like our program's successfulness, which is the other piece, because what is it that we're missing within Eureka, the assessment, that we're just not getting to it. I mean, we always hear teachers, they just can't get through the curriculum, it's too much. So what units are we missing in order to, move them on, right? It's a real problem. So we have to look at that over time. And now that we have some of these accurate data measures and a system that's going to help us organize that information, hopefully we'll be able to make some really solid decisions moving forward.
And I believe that Eureka Squared has fewer lessons than Eureka, just because of what Brittany's saying. It's just impossible to get through it all.
Right.
So which kids are missing the fractions unit every year? And it just compounds, so.
Yep.
Okay,
And
next.
it's not just about, middle and high school either. I mean,
Right.
It goes earlier than that, right? So
Right.
like our students are doing really, really well and they're going up and down, and then it's kind of like, so what is the disconnect between the elementary and high school? It could be a program issue. I mean, there's all sorts of things going on there. It could just be that middle school's really hard, there's so many things happening for them. So how can we support other areas of the middle school, child development? So lots of things to think about there. The next is about attendance. So this is actually kind of exciting. Last year, well, I'm excited. Last year at this time, we were at 91.63 for our attendance rate. And this year you can see we're up, most schools are right around the 95 rate, which is really great. So that's improved. I think that goes a lot to show for culture and just how students are feeling coming to school and that kind of thing, as well as COVID being down is really helpful
It's not
with
gone.
attendance rate.
It's gone.
It's not gone, but it's down.
That's great,
And
by the
on the
way.
next slide is our high school. So that is really good.
That's awesome.
That's really great.
What is
Yeah,
that? What is that?
Almost
94.87.
Oh, good.
Yeah, really great. And high school was typically our lowest.
There we are.
So that's really
That's
fantastic. Yeah, Kate's done a really nice job up there. All right, moving on. Yeah, next we're going to talk a little bit about culture and wellness. However, the attendance could also go in that. It's kind of hard to separate them. but this one, we're gonna focus a little bit more on behavior data. So go ahead next. So this chart, I ran it by month, just overall for the entire SU. I know that, like, if I were to divide it up for you by all the different ways that we could, you know, you'd have a lot more slides. So I just tried to isolate a little bit, but you can see we're comparing, the blue is 22-23, the orange is 23-24. You can see a major increase. A lot of that, I personally believe, has to do with the fact that we put in place some very consistent behavior response protocols
Across the SU.
across the SU, and they're being monitored very closely. The other thing with minor behaviors is this new cell phone policy. So obviously that's going to be, students are going to challenge that quite a bit in the beginning, getting used to how that's going to work, how teachers are going to respond to things, and then hopefully we'll see the decrease. So I ran this, you can see up at the top was on the 14th. So obviously the orange line will increase slightly by the end of the month. But, Colleen?
Thanks. Can you talk a little bit about what changes you guys made to
To the
how
response.
yes, responses?
Yeah, I think just the fact that we had it was a big change. So what we did is across the board, every school had some sort of, whether it be a flow chart, this is how we're going to respond to things,
Sure.
you know, use collaborative problem solving. But this year, what we did is we very specifically outlined, you know, here's the overall behavior, this is what that behavior means, and here's what we're going to do about it, the general response. Now, a lot of times it might just say for minor behaviors that the teacher contacts home and has a collaborative problem solving conversation with the student. However, it also means that they have to report it in PowerSchool, which automatically alerts an administrator and the other behavior support staff. So when they get that alert, they're more easily able to say, oh, this incident has happened for this student 3 times. We clearly need to do something different. And then somebody else steps in and we move on to maybe the major behavior response protocol where an administrator gets in or something along those lines. That's a general overview.
Thank you. It sounds like you're measuring differently, or you're measuring something you weren't measuring maybe last year.
Sort of. What we're doing, I think, is we gave very clear guidelines for teachers about their reporting. So this is when you need to enter data into our system. And that data is helping us make decisions about what to do. Yeah.
This will be
So,
good.
Yes.
Brittany, Christina, are there also conversations around how, because they're entering the data in, but are there also conversations about approaches and how they're responding?
Oh, yeah, that's part of the document. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It gives you guidelines on what you should do.
Okay. And this is consistent throughout the entire SU?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I appreciate the context in that you've updated the reporting protocols and that kind of thing. I'd be interested to see what this looks like across 2 years of comparables.
Agreed.
Because clearly this, I mean, it looks alarming at first glance, but if the lay of the land has changed around how you're reporting and the frequency of reporting, then this, you know,
Exactly.
it's a little bit apples and oranges.
And I think the staff are
You
really
got to
asking.
start somewhere.
Yep, yeah, exactly.
So they're invested in actually filling out the PowerSchool incident report,
Yeah,
which is helpful.
no, I'm glad that it seems like we're more consistently getting the data that we want to get to be able to accurately track this. So I'm glad to see we're moving in that direction.
And
even
this
if
data is all pulled from PowerSchool.
Yeah.
So since it's all entered into PowerSchool, EduClimber pulls it in and then it takes it and divides it up in all the different possible ways that you can think of data to be able to analyze it. So that's pretty exciting for nerds like me who like data, at least. Go ahead. And this is our major behavior data, very similar idea. I mean, it follows the exact same trend. But I do hope that this will level off, and the next time I give a data report, I'll run the same charts, so we'll be able to see the difference over time. Obviously, November, December gets a little funky because we're not in school most of the time, it feels like. So, and I think
That's your last
is
slide.
that the last one? Yeah. Are there any questions?
Do you think at some point, maybe you can talk a little bit specifically about, because you said there are some behaviors that you're seeing, one kid is doing, 3 times. about those particular behaviors? Because it sounds like you're saying there's that minor behavior.
Yep.
Which means that students they're being taught and responding to teachers' interventions. But then there are these other behaviors that are just.
So what specific behaviors are
Yeah.
popping up the most kind
Yeah.
of for our majors?
Yeah, and how, yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely run that data and either share it or do it for next time.
Okay, I was gonna write it down, but you got that. It's on your list. All right. Thank you, Brittany.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we're very excited about the systems that are in place. It's really
Especially
helping us.
across the
Yeah,
SU, that's
Yeah.
pretty neat.
yeah. Bill, am I good to go?
I want to know what my time was.
I don't know.
Use the force. You were 42 seconds under.
Wow. Okay. Get the right tab up here. That's like competition now. I've got to beat Brittany's time.
Good luck.
No, I'm just kidding. The procedures are linked as I do every month. I'm bringing you 2 more. These have actually been in practice for a little bit. So if you have questions or comments, let me know, but I'm not going to get into details, especially on the harassment, hazing, and bullying. Those are very prescribed procedures that we just follow. So I'm bringing you the results of the question of the month for November. We didn't get as many responses, and I attribute that to the question being so pretty similar to the October question. But as you can see, written communication is by far the preferred method, and the method that parents are using. I think it's mostly email. I don't think that there are a lot of comments written in PowerSchool from teachers. I think it's more back and forth through email with parents. So that's what people preferred. People do use the PowerSchool web application and the PowerSchool mobile app. And really, people don't use the report card the most, which isn't a big shock. This one was, how often are you accessing PowerSchool to find information about your child's academic progress? A few people said daily. A majority of the people said once or twice a week, which is great. Once or twice a month. And then only a parent-teacher conference time. We have a small percentage of parents that just access it then, which is really good information, I think. There were some comments, just a few. There were a couple of people that said, I don't know what PowerSchool is, so that's good information for us about how we make sure people know what it is and how to use it. There are some schools using, or classrooms, I know Heartland is using Class Dojo as a school. Parents really seem to like that. It's instant information all the time, pictures and back and forth with the teacher. No,
Heartland does too? Oh,
Class
great.
Dojo, yeah, this year.
Windsor use it?
Yeah, a lot of teachers
Yeah,
in
a lot
Windsor
of
use it
teachers.
as well.
Mainly K-5.
Okay.
And some people reported that PowerSchool is used inconsistently with staff. So depending on which teacher, which grade level, it's not consistent across the board. And we would expect some of that depending on the grade level, but we want to work to make sure we're informing parents of how students are doing. So that was good information. I came up with the next question all by myself. So if you guys want to do it differently, let me know. Let me see if I can pull it up. I thought it would be, gotta find the right slideshow. Hold on one second. Where did it
That's a
go?
good one.
That's weird. I can't find it. I have it here. So this one was around community engagement because all the boards are working on that as a goal. So the questions are, what school does your child attend? What's the grade level? Have you attended any community family events this year? And what kind of community events would you like to see in the future? So I hope we get some good information around what people want to, attend. So comments or questions on that? Does that sound okay? Or were you looking to go in a different direction?
I like that.
Good? Okay.
Because we need to know,
What they want.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, because we tried things and
Right.
no one
I
can.
wonder if I should put on there, would you be more apt to attend an and not that I think it's a good idea, but hybrid event. We tend to get more participation, but I mean, I feel like we miss something when we're not all together in person. But for some families, maybe they can't make it. I don't know.
I think it depends on the type of event.
Yeah.
Type of event too. If you're doing like a presentation where you can
Mhm.
easily broadcast slides.
Yeah.
And then have people in the room looking at them versus if you're doing like a kind of more
Dinner.
open social network dinner. Yeah,
That's
I mean,
true.
that gets a lot harder.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so that'll go out.
Was our last meeting, about the budget, was that hybrid? It was a dinner, but could people,
You mean last year?
yeah, could people see it online?
At the SU presentation that Larry did was hybrid. And some people were here, we were here, and some people could access it online.
Tell me about the big meeting
You
where
mean the
we had
one town
dinner.
meeting?
Oh,
The one that in the
at Mount
cafeteria?
Scottney.
Yeah, the Mount Scottney one. Yeah.
No, that was not a hybrid.
Yeah, that
That
was
was in
recorded.
person.
Oh,
That was
it was
recorded,
recorded?
yeah.
Recorded by Woods on Air.
Yeah. So we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Budget then. Okay. The next thing on my report, I said I would bring it back because we didn't get to spend up very much time looking at the strategic plan report card. So I brought it back this month. I have copies for you. And it's linked as well in the presentation, but
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to go over it for a few minutes. Bill, how am I doing on time?
Thank you.
I'm good? Okay. So this was, this report card was created by the administrative team. So at our winter retreat last year, we started looking at all of the strategies within the strategic plan in each goal area and rating whether we had started work or not started work, or we've done a little bit of work, or we're feeling underway, or we've achieved the strategy. And so you'll see, I feel like we're in a pretty good place knowing that we have really 2 more years to finish out the strategic plan before we implement a new one. And most areas are either underway or achieved. And I can go through quickly, or you can look at it and ask me questions, whatever you prefer. We tried to collect some evidence of how we know these things are moving along, and just drafted those in the evidence column. But some of the things, like our comprehensive assessment system is in place, up and running. Each year it gets updated. Brittany and the CIA team's in charge of that. We've had extended learning opportunities in our system for a while, and flexible pathways. Kim's going to come present at the next Mount Scottney meeting on flexible pathways.
Oh.
We're working on student advisory boards. Student lighthouse teams being established in each of our schools, which is really important. So we're pretty excited that that's underway. It's not fully achieved, but we're in progress. The one thing, I think it's just the one thing that we really haven't touched is the portrait of an SU member. So we did portrait of a graduate. Our thinking was we were going to do portrait of an SU member, and we have not started that yet. But I think
What does that mean, an SU member?
a faculty and staff.
Oh, okay.
So what do we really think is important that all our staff members carry with them? What is important for
Who
us?
would be involved in that sort of conversation?
I would say representation from all areas,
Good.
community, teachers, support staff, board members, students. We did it when we did the portrait of a graduate. I mean, it was a very large stakeholder group, and it took us a year. I think it was about a year, right, to come up with those competencies.
Yeah.
So it's definitely on our radar. We haven't really had the capacity to do it. Hopefully we'll be able to get it started. So that one we haven't really made any progress on. And I think some of that's been the stress level of our staff, and just having the capacity to even get there. So something we hope to get to.
This is very helpful.
Good. It's not complicated. I hope that it's easy to read. I mean, I do want to, our goal 3, our data and communications. I mean, give credit to Larry. He's pretty strategic in how we get these things moving. So we do have our data leader. That's Brittany. That's achieved. She's in our budget. We do have a part-time stipended communications person, which just happened in the last month. And I can say her name, right?
Yeah.
It's Brooke.
Winter.
Yeah, Brooke Winter. And she is a local.
Yeah,
She's
Windsor graduate.
Windsor graduate. She's doing it part-time, and she's got she's taken on the website. She's taken on some other
Social media.
yeah, getting our
She's gonna start doing some of the newsletters and, this summer when we redo the website, that'll be a big part. So right now it's just part-time, she has a full-time job.
It's pretty exciting though.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
So I will stop, but you have this, and you can, if you have questions, just reach out to me. We'll come back and review again.
I do just,
Sure.
and I may be off with this, but I know that there were certain people that were involved in putting together the strategic plan
Yes.
in the community. And I just wonder if we can reach out to them, just like you did here.
Oh, sure.
And just kind of let them know, thank
What we're
them
doing.
for, because they were part of putting this together. And
Yeah.
I don't know how others feel, but I mean, it would be sort of nice to be able to say, this was however many years ago. And
I think that's a
this is-
great idea.
This
I think
is
it's a
how
great
far
idea.
we've come,
Yeah.
and we're still moving, but we want to thank you for being part of this, because I know you've talked about, we're gonna start looking at our strategic
Yeah.
plan again. But I think that it's one way of engaging those folks that.
Yeah,
We have that list, Angie, right?
Oh, yeah.
Somewhere? Yeah. So that's a great
as
idea.
long as their emails have stayed the same.
And
Yeah.
And what is the plan for the next strategic plan?
So,
This was
I
huge.
know, I
Planning
was
starts
just-
next year.
We'll
Yeah.
have to start planning, and then we'll have to budget for, we'll have to decide whether we're gonna hire someone to help us with that work. But that work should start, we should start planning for it next year, and it should get budgeted for, so that we.
Yeah. I just felt like this
Yeah.
was such a huge,
it seemed that way. I was not part of it, but it
Yeah.
just seemed that way.
it was just such a huge undertaking,
It
and
was.
previous strategic plans
Yeah.
were just like a rollover.
Yeah.
So,
Are you
did the-
developing the whole thing, or
Yeah,
you?
Yeah, we
We did
did
the portrait of a graduate for the first
Right.
half, we wouldn't have to redo the portrait.
right,
So it would only be the second half of it, and it might have felt longer because we were meeting virtually and
COVID.
doing it during COVID,
Well,
so.
and it just kept going. It was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay.
So that's on our agenda for the future. Okay, the last thing is the draft calendar for FY 24, 25 next year. It's in draft form. I've taken it to the union leaders. They're taking it back to their membership, so we can't adopt it tonight. We need to get their input, but I just thought I would share it with you. It's not a huge change from the current year, and it's aligned with the region. So our kids that are accessing tech programs have the same schedule that the rest of students have. So it should look like Hartford's, Bill, pretty close. And hopefully I can bring it back next month you can adopt it. But it's just there for you to look at if you want to start planning vacations.
Well, if it looks like Hartford, I hope it isn't the hot mess Hartford's was this year, but
Well, I hope not as well. It's a regional calendar that I get from, it doesn't come from Tom, it comes from another superintendent, CTE superintendent. Okay,
for whatever reason, in the last minute, they staggered their dates, the starting dates at Hartford. It was really weird.
this current year?
This past year, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's not on here, so. The last slide is Katie's gonna report out on resignations and new hires. I think Katie's online. If she's not, I'm gonna do it.
Yes, I'm here.
There she is. Katie, you're on.
Okay, Nicole Mancino, who is a mental health clinician, resigned 2 weeks ago from their position. They were the mental health clinician split between Weathersfield and Heartland. The other two things we have going on, Nikki Kurtzall is out on a 6-week leave starting in December. And her long-term sub for that position will be Serena Algary. She's just coming on and getting onboarded now. And she will be the speech language pathologist for both Weathersfield and Heartland, split between the two, and will also be remote.
Oh,
So, under actions, Bill, I think we have to accept the resignation of Nicole Mancino.
We have
And
to accept, or we have to vote on it?
you have to vote on it, that's what I meant.
Okay.
You get to decide what you want.
Okay.
We have to take action on it. Okay, that concludes my report. I believe, yep.
Katie, before we transition, was Nicole a at will or not? Okay.
No, she was not.
And we have posted the position.
Yeah.
And hope to fill it.
Elizabeth?
Thank you. I was wondering whether next month, since I thought we were going to do it this month, we could have a presentation of what's in our curriculum, because we don't get to, we just get to hear what the name of the curriculum is. We don't get to hear anything about what its contents are. And I was hoping that it could be, we discussed it last month as something that is not just a presentation of the kind of book jacket version, but actually learning about what's inside there. Thanks.
So Elizabeth, might that be something more appropriate to an actual whole different event? When looking at describing and reviewing curriculum, that may be something that we might want to do as a curriculum presentation, not as a school board, but just as an SU in general. Because when you get into outlining curriculum, I mean, that could take an entire school board meeting and then another week.
My concern, Bill, is that we have had several curricula implemented without the board's approval or even knowing what's inside the curriculum. And it's, I mean,
I'm not disagreeing with you.
I'm
I'm just
extremely
wondering how
frustrated about it.
exactly. I'm trying to envision how a meaningful discussion or presentation on what's in the new curriculum, how that could fit in within the format of a school board meeting. And I'm open to suggestions. It also might be something that we do similarly on how we do the equity thing now. Take 20 minutes a board meeting and review certain pieces. But it's not something that we're going to do in a single meeting in a single night within a 30-minute block.
I understand. I do
Yeah.
understand, but I am expressing my frustration over not knowing what's inside any of the curricula that we did not even approve. It was just reported that we were getting new curricula implemented, or it was reported that we were testing curricula, and then suddenly we don't hear anything about the testing. We hear that it's implemented, and I'd like to know what's inside there. I keep hearing things about different, I hear things from different perspectives. I haven't heard anything from the administration about it, and I think it's very strange.
So maybe Christine, you and I, and possibly
Angie,
if Angie could have a discussion about how that could fit in the structure of it. Beth?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. I mean, it is not the board's role to be voting or approving curriculum, correct? I mean, we are voting on policy issues, but that curriculum is not considered policy issue, correct?
Christine, there is something about in a policy about board.
We did,
We
yeah,
had a discussion about this.
When it was, purchased at the end of the year with funds, Angie reached out. Bill, we had a conversation about like, how do we do this? The policy isn't clear. What do you want? And so that's one of the policies we need to update. I think Angie's basically said, I'll do whatever the board wants us to do.
Right.
And that's where we ended.
We
that
had a
conversation.
board
Policy on it is
We did have a board meeting discussion.
Yeah, before it was implemented.
but
I don't-
Beth,
I
that is
don't-
a good point, and is that that the policy on curriculum and approval is not particularly clear, and you know, at some point we do have to trust into the professionals we do to hire. At the same time, I do understand and agree with Elizabeth's point that it would be nice to get a reporting on what is involved in this new curriculum and how it's structured and what's hoped to go forward. I'm just struggling with visualizing how to do that in a meaningful way in a school board meeting. But I'm more than happy to work with anyone to try to formulate a way to do that. Elizabeth, you had another comment?
I was just going to say that I don't think the board has, the role of the board is not necessarily to pick curriculum, but we are spending money on the curriculum. And as board members, we should know what curriculum our schools are using. I mean, it just seems very strange to me that we don't.
Okay. I am very happy to tackle this. Thank
So
you.
Bill,
Elizabeth.
yeah, and I can email you. We can set up a meeting.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Elizabeth. That ends the.
Yep.
And I've lost track of where we were with time because it ran out. So I can't jump into how the competition was going, which is not a competition. Items for discussion followed by motions if needed. Legislative funding for public TV access. I thought I believe we did this at the Ascutney board as well.
We did.
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is this Davis? Is this in your court again, or?
Yeah, insofar as I brought this to your attention, Elizabeth,
Yep.
with my Windsor on Air board member hat on, which means that I will be abstaining from this vote. Yeah, and Elizabeth, you did a good job filling in some of the gaps here, but the form, if you click on the link in the agenda, it pretty clearly spells out what the ask is, which is really just getting permission from members of this board to have a representative of the board sign on on our behalf to a letter that says please support community media centers. The very short version is that previously collectives of small, cable access stations were supported by cable subscriptions. There's been a huge, precipitous drop in those because of the rise in streaming. So there is and I'm seeing what exactly it is, but there's an ask for state level funding. Yeah, appropriate $1 million one-time funding to the Vermont Access Network, which Windsor and Air is part of, along with a bunch of other stations around here, and then enact the Community Media Public Benefit Fund Bill to assure long-term funding. I think that most of us are aware, but Windsor and Air and other local cable access stations provide a lot of benefit to our community. This meeting will go out on it. It is where I believe the vast majority of people actually watch these meetings through that through that channel or through other channels that can rebroadcast it. So, yeah, that's the short version. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or thoughts on that, but in order for us to sign this, we just as a board need to give someone permission and then assign somebody to submit it.
So you're specifically asking the supervisory union? 'Cause we
Yeah.
did this at ours.
Yes. Yeah.
So I just had it open. Where exactly did it go? It was in a. Okay. Okay. So if I remember correctly, I would take a motion to support the Community Media Center by approving blank blank to fill out this form and send it on behalf of the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Board. Is there any takers on who would like to do this?
And it should not be.
It shouldn't be Davis.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Who did it for Mount Scotty?
We did it for, yeah,
Oh,
no,
Rebecca did.
Stephanie, I don't know who's.
Rebecca did.
Rebecca did.
Rebecca.
So how about Nikki?
What do I need to do? Elizabeth said to me, Rebecca, all it takes is 40 seconds.
Okay.
She was right.
I could do 40 seconds. And I agree with, I completely agree with
Okay.
the purpose.
Okay, so I will take a motion that Nikki represent our board and fill this out and send it to the state.
Okay.
Okay, I just,
Forthwith.
yes. I moved.
So
that-
moved.
So moved. Do we have a second?
Peach and Nancy.
Who's the second?
Second is Nancy.
Me.
Okay, Beth.
There's a lot of seconds.
Okay. All in favor of having Nikki take this on, filling out the Support Community Media Center and sending it in, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. So
No.
moved. It has passed.
Who helped you with it, Rebecca?
So how do I do this?
It's a Google sheet. It's-
Yeah,
you
you
just-
just sign it. It's. you
Okay.
have-
Who sends it to her? the Google sheet.
Elizabeth sent it to me.
Okay,
Okay,
And also, yeah.
I can send it to you if you want to have the.
okay,
that would be great.
okay. All right, we're good now. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Nikki.
Yep.
Thank you, Nikki.
Okay. Policy. And I am going to click the timer on here. The new community use of school facilities, second read. Let me take a look at it. Elizabeth?
Thanks. Christine, you were going to follow up with Pietro to see whether it was possible to impose the question of behavior within the building being consistent throughout the day.
Yep. Christine, do you share that with me, I believe? You want to go over that?
Yeah, so basically I asked Pietro if all groups are, and maybe I didn't word it correctly, required to adhere to the rules of the school during the day. Pietro's answer was no. He said we can't limit or deny access based on anybody's beliefs. We can't limit access because of a group's viewpoints. If we're going to open it up to one group, we have to open it up to all groups.
Yeah, but that wasn't the question. The question was whether we can require groups using the buildings to adhere to the same kinds of rules that we require during the day.
So that piece, like firearms, smoking, alcohol, those kinds of rules, absolutely, we can have them adhere to those.
And whatever rules are in policy, this I believe was the answer. It is whatever rules are in policy. We can't impose behavior expectations that we have on students that are, are there, but whatever policy rules that we have within the building, we can expect those members of who use the building to follow them.
Okay, so I guess for an example is, I think it was in yellow. I don't have the policy up right in front of me, but I think it was in yellow. The question of whether we want to allow guns in the building. Shouldn't that just be off the table since it's already off the table for the daytime? I don't really understand why it would be allowed at night.
Well, it wouldn't be because it's
Violates policy,
Yep.
also it's a state law.
Yeah.
it's also state law.
Right.
Yes.
But so
Yeah,
why was that question in there?
Well,
They used to do
because
hunter safety at Heartland. That's where I
Yeah.
took hunter safety.
right, and so yeah, some schools want to do hunter safety, and there are exceptions to that. For example, if a social studies demonstration is bringing in a demonstration on colonial firearms, then that person would have to get a superintendent and principal permission to do it.
Even if there were no bullets?
Well, yeah, I mean, it
Yeah.
does say that the superintendent shall establish procedures for the school, use of school facilities by community members, which at minimum, and then it lists. And it says, or under the yellow highlighted section Elizabeth is referring to, says choose one of the following and delete the other choice once your board decides whether or not to permit possession or use. And so the first choice is shall prohibit possession or use of a firearm or dangerous or deadly weapon, or shall permit possession or use of a firearm or a dangerous or deadly weapon for instructional or other specific purposes. Example, gun safety courses or gun shows. So you can either prohibit them completely, or you can choose to have a protocol if you're going to offer a hunter safety course in the school, which our schools have done. Ireland, for sure, because I have when I was there.
So
they were
that's so Elizabeth, that's something we need to decide as a board.
Yeah.
So the question is if we completely don't allow the use of firearms, which instinctively would be my choice, what would it affect? Because being, so old since the day that I took hunter safety, which I think it was at Springfield, one of the Springfield schools, I hadn't considered that. Does Heartland do that?
Yeah,
Yes.
how often does this happen? And
Once a year.
once
In the
yeah.
fall.
And I always brought
It's a
a
couple
colonial
classes.
rifle in to show how to load and do all that stuff. So,
The question is if we open it up to like hunter safety, does that mean we have to open it up to a gun show? Like, are they equal?
can we,
It says with superintendent approval, doesn't
It says the examples are gun safety courses or gun shows.
Yeah.
So if you're going to permit a gun safety course,
Then do we permit a gun show? I mean, because that's what.
unless you're going to list exactly the specific purposes in the policy.
Can't you just say such as gun safety, hunter safety, and not list anything else?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
And then it's up
Yeah.
to
It's
the
that like that's,
superintendent.
I can't think of any other reason.
Do we have anything analogous to this policy at all right now in place, or is this
No,
completely
No.
novel? But
this is
okay.
new.
Yep, that's what I thought.
And has hunter safety ever been taught at the police station?
We don't have a police station. Like that, that's the problem. I mean, in Heartland,
That's what happened.
They don't use real guns. They use dummy guns.
yeah.
For hunter safety.
For the hunter education course.
Yeah.
They use real firearms at the range, which is down past the
and if
school.
you have a colonial rifle, they usually don't work anyway. It's it would just be like a museum piece.
I think though that we're just at a time in a period where we are just seeing so many fatalities as a result of gun use. I mean, the topic is right at the top of our
Newsfeed.
our new every
All the
day,
time.
and we're seeing this. So I think we want to be careful about. I'm not saying we shouldn't have the hunter safety, but I'm just trying to think how do we make that available to those students who value that and those families who do value it. But I think we want to think about how is it that we promote guns in our educational institution.
Beth?
Yeah, I think we also just need to think about, because it also says other deadly weapons. So are you talking about like if there's a martial arts class that wanted to use the gym and they're going to use, I don't know, nunchucks or something, whatever it may be. Also, my daughter does fencing. There's a lot of deadly weapons just in the other room that they're fencing with.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking too, people that do reenactments and things like that, like would we, if this, group wanted to come in and do that. So like, how are we, how, do we just have to do it on a one-to-one basis of how we approve that? But it's not just a gun issue.
Yeah.
Well, before I jump in, Colleen, when you have your hand raised.
Thank you. I'm just wondering how much choice we have about it. Like, this is, are we able to write policy that would control who can come? And I mean, that's kind of what the question is on the table. Like,
Yeah, I think I'd like to take some time with Christine and work on a statement in which there would be a procedure involved for the approval of firearms and other dangerous and deadly weapons based upon their education, the educational purpose of them. And so if there's an educational purpose for those to come through, then there would be an approval process. Because it's a great viewpoint here and a great different point. For example, if there is a fencing exhibition that wants to come in, we don't want a blanket statement that would prohibit that. I'd prefer to have a statement within the policy that indicates that there is a educational component, and then there is a procedure to go through to get approval. And to answer Colleen's questions, absolutely, we can shape this into a way that makes it logical and usable, especially for the the community that we live in. And the simple fact is that many of our community members are hunters, and it's a part of Vermont life that many of us have grown up with. So I think this particular piece will take some time to try to make something that makes sense.
If you do speak to Pietro again too, it might be worth just really parsing out what the legal definition in that statement is, a firearm or dangerous or deadly weapon. Because again, if it's dummy firearms being used in a hunter safety course, I don't even know if that meets that definition. If they look like firearms but are not functional and could not possibly be live.
Right.
Because those are two very different. One is an inert object that looks like a thing, and one is that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
And we should run it by, I mean, if we're gonna make decisions and changes, we should run it by legal counsel anyway, so.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I didn't think we were going to pass that tonight anyway. Anti-racial procedures and anti-racial policy and procedure review.
So Tracy started to review that last month in her presentation.
Yep.
And I just wasn't sure if we needed more discussion on it, or we felt like it was okay. So that's why that's there.
And this isn't up for review on our timeline, right? Is it
No.
5 year for this or?
It's not, I mean, it's good to talk,
Sorry.
yeah, to make sure that we're implementing the procedures.
Elizabeth?
It says in the either the policy or procedures that it should be reviewed annually, and it hasn't been.
Yeah.
It's part of the policy.
Okay.
So um, I think the first thing to kind of consider, has anyone gone over the definitions? Tracy, have you taken time to look at the definitions and see anything that concerns you?
I mean, I just kind of, I've read them, but I also know there was a lot of work that went into passing this, so kind of haven't thought about rewording it, you know, and just sort of following through on what was said in here. That's kind of how I've been looking at it, but.
So no glaring issues that you see.
I'll have to take a minute. I haven't looked at it through that lens of
Okay.
like, if I would change anything, what would I change? So I can look back at it and
Well,
see.
not so much is there anything that you would change. Of course, there's something. I'm sure there's things in here that we'd all would change if we read through it again. But what I'm asking is not you, but I'll throw this in out here. Is there anyone who has anything that would require further review and discussion at a later time?
Well, I had an opportunity to go over it again and as Tracy mentioned, appreciated thinking back to the work that went into it. I really would like to get some input from students about this policy. Is this something that just us adults are looking at? And because yeah, I'd really be interested in thinking about how do we get input from our students about our policy? Yeah, because this policy really was intended to lift up all voices, including student voices. And so, and teachers and educators, but I don't know how we would do that. That's something we can talk about.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't done that with students, but we should. So Tracy and I, we can put our brains together, figure out.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a living, breathing, like I see this as a lot that's guiding my work plan. So I think it'll continue to, we'll keep finding ways to bring it in, but yeah, student voice for sure.
I want to piggyback on what Rebecca said. I would also, not just to get student input about the policy, but also student input on the success of what's in the policy statements. If they see any changes that have been enacted, or have ideas of changes within the building to make this policy more successful. Not necessarily changing the policy, but students would say, we think that X, Y, and Z would make it more equitable in this environment. Okay. I'd like to sort of come up with a way to enact that this school year at some point. Is there a student equity committee that?
There's not an official student equity committee, but I know it's come up, like one of the things I was gonna share that we're working on is trying to come up with a process for how we address, like when hateful things are said, like what happens? Where do we plug in with like restorative practices? There's there's somebody who's coming in that's gonna hopefully help shape that, and we want to do that with input from students. So it's like seeing all the opportunities for ways we can get students involved in helping to support those kinds of processes.
Yeah.
There's that, and then there's the student group at Heartland that started. I mean, there's like there's like a lot of student things,
Yeah.
but no one official equity student group. But we can, I mean, I like the idea of getting them more involved in this, so, yes. It's a yes. I mean, we just have to figure out
How
like,
to do it.
you know,
Yeah.
in what ways.
Well, it sounds
So,
like,
It's
you know,
it,
the
like-
Heartland piece is really
Isn't that cool?
exciting.
Yeah.
That is so, so cool.
Yeah,
I'd like to hear more about that as that's evolving,
Yeah.
that is evolving.
yeah.
There's also
Yeah.
the middle
The
school group.
YRBA. Oh,
And the middle school group at Windsor. who
right.
is-
Yes, yeah.
So that would be a perfect.
Yeah, there were 18 kids who showed up to a meeting that Colleen put out a call for who wants to come in to help do stuff that's like anti-hate. And 18 kids showed up
That's awesome.
in 2 days'
Yes,
notice, which
yeah.
was super hopeful and inspiring. And we've got them working on a bunch of different things. Some of them are doing anti-hate posters, like some of their, yeah. And we see them as a group that we could potentially train in restorative practices over time so that the middle school students are actually the ones who are leading, are equipped to like actually lead that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so happening
It's
in
in
pockets,
process.
but not, it's in
Yeah.
process, but not like
Yeah.
How do you get those pockets together?
Together.
I mean,
Yeah.
even like you said, the
Well,
Lighthouse team and ABS, you know,
Yeah.
how do you bring even a few of them together?
Yep.
yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, we've got that. I wrote that on our list, Bill, Tracy.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like by spring
Oh,
we'll have a
Bill?
lot more clarity on
Yes?
what-
Is someone
I-
yelling yet?
One question about this policy. Under 4, policy statement, it has number 2, oppose teaching that, teachings that perpetuate white supremacy, superiority, white privilege by acknowledging the violence, disenfranchisement, and bigotry these topics depict before a lesson begins. I wouldn't want to tell a teacher what to do. You'd
Well,
want.
that's what we do, though. That's what the policy is. That's where we have.
I don't agree with how that's, I just don't like that as, you know, that's like a formula. I just didn't, it should be part of it all year, but not before a lesson begins. I just don't like that at all, but I don't know.
I think it's just thinking about things in a different way, right? And Tracy's teaching us to really ask questions like through an equity lens. Like when you're looking at a lesson, you know, who's being left out, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're starting to do that.
Yeah.
It's not systematized yet
Yeah.
by any means, but
I mean,
Yeah.
a quick example, and I think Tracy brought this up in, the signing and the creation of the Constitution, and that, the fact that the men who signed the Constitution were all white men, but looking at it through an equity lens and in researching, and you realize what ethnic group what were the two major ethnic groups in that participated in the creation of the Constitution. Okay, what ethnic group was the most populous in it? And the fact is that the room was full of the Abenaki, not the Abenaki, but the Iroquois tribes. Much of the Constitution comes from the actual Iroquois Nation Constitution, and in the creation of the Constitution, many of the members, many of those who were in the room during the signing of the Constitution were actually Native Americans. And so just looking at it from, before I would teach about the Constitution, I would consider that lens and how I would incorporate that within the lesson. And I think that's just what this policy is asking teachers, or as you said, telling teachers to do, to consider something before you teach or create the lesson, to consider what sort of lens that we're going to put on this. And, the usual cookie cutter, answer was that, well, James Madison was actually the father of the Constitution. When in reality, yeah, he had a lot of ideas and he wrote many parts of it, but actually in the room was the Iroquois Nation representatives. So
I don't know what to say about it. I mean, I think a lot was stolen from the Iroquois in terms of things that they, like how they lived, but I don't know how much they were really, I don't know.
yeah, they were in the room. They were in the room during the creating of the Constitution, and that's been whitewashed. That's been within the pictures. That was not painted. When in some paintings you can see them painting the signing of the Constitution, and the left of the painting is all blank because that was where the representatives of the Iroquois nations were. So yeah, that may not be something that you're aware of, Tracy. So, but that's a reality.
I have many questions because they were also at the time actively attempting genocide against the Native Americans. So I don't know if it was I don't know. I'm curious.
Well, both can be true at the same time. The genocide of the Native Americans was,
I don't think this really pertains to our policy.
Absolutely not.
So
Thank
let's
you.
wrap this up.
But it was
I just want to end on time.
Yeah, it was actually an example that I had of how this policy is asking or telling teachers to look at an event through a lens that could oppose that would stop the perpetuation of white supremacy superiority. Okay.
We might want to stop before we sign off on a unit or have a unit that says that Elvis and Carl Perkins solely and by themselves invented rock and roll, right?
Yeah.
That's one that's a little bit more.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on, and local wellness, I think, is next. That's true.
Yeah, it's an
Okay.
updated, I mean, we have a wellness policy. This is the updated policy put out by the Agency of Education. And there are lots of implementation. There are lots of things that we need to implement. Some we're already doing, some we're not. So we have a committee meeting on December 6th, which will be an initial meeting with representation from the school nurses, from our health teachers, or lack thereof, our PE teachers, school counselors. Eventually, that group will have community members, students, but this is the initial meeting to
Make
just get
sure
a.
food services there.
And food services,
Yeah.
they're there. I forgot to mention them.
Yeah.
So we have to go through the policy and create the procedures, but the board needs to adopt this policy by June of 24. So by the end of this school year, it has to be adopted.
I think it's a really good policy in
Great
terms
policy.
of,
Yeah.
it's addressing the issue of obesity, which we're seeing, I'm sure the nurses can for that, but a lot of the diseases that our young people are coming up with. And so I think it really begins to address that piece, from our point of view. And I think that's so important. So I think that this is an important policy.
Yeah, it definitely is, and it's got, under that nutrition piece, I mean, Greg and I are always talking about the cafeteria is the biggest classroom in the school, and how are we gonna educate our kids on where their food comes from, and sustainability, and all those things, so it's just figuring out how to do it and who helps with it.
And I think it falls into the strategic plan when it talks about the plan strategy, student mental health and social emotional leader, but student mental health. And what we eat really impacts on how we feel. So I think it's an important policy.
The one thing that I think it's a great policy for the most part, but under the nutrition guidelines bullet for I feel like a year ago, I would have been like, yeah, definitely. As far as like, food that's provided, for classroom celebrations and stuff. But I also feel like, some of the stuff that I've heard and read in the last year is that by shaming foods, we create them to be more of a craving, and that there should be space for celebration. And so
That's number 4 under the goals for nutrition services, the reward.
yeah, well, no, but there's also foods provided but not sold may include food that is part of a classroom celebration or provided by parents and community members. And I feel like if a parent makes a celebration, that doesn't happen every day. It's like, those foods are not the foods that are making kids obese. Yes, I agree with, like, we shouldn't be handing out candy for kids' rewards, but
But it's okay to have a class celebration. and
yeah,
have some
I mean, if a
cookies once in
parent
while.
brings in cupcakes, like, there are foods that you can celebrate with that are,
I don't think I think that those they hold an important place as we're growing children. And I think that they're really important to honor and also encourage. I mean, we want the parents to bring in whatever. So that's really good. But then we here can also create an opportunity to then speak to a plan that we introduce that gives parents another lens, saying, oh, okay, so the school is doing this, and so when they have conversations with children, it's like, well, at school we're eating this, and it's okay.
this is designed to limit what parents can bring. Directly,
okay.
and I'm not okay with that.
Yeah, neither am I.
I think we need to allow for celebration.
I agree with that.
So I guess to me, the really key words in that.
Hang on, Davis. Beth, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I think the term like when feasible is in there. So I think we, can hang a lot of our hat on that in the sense of allowing for celebration. And it's also like, we need to also think about culturally appropriate foods and like people from other cultures maybe bringing in foods that we don't understand or recognize or things like that. And so just making sure we're not shutting down things or, families wanting to share their culture through foods in the policy as well.
Yeah, and Beth, that essentially was what I was going to say, is that those words "when feasible" are really key there to me. And it sounds like none of us are advocating that we go with the second option there, which is that to me is the much more restrictive one, that they will at minimum comply with smart snack standards. I think that's overly restrictive. And I think that the first option, on a policy basis, I think that if you were to just directly translate that policy into procedure, then it may come across as being overly restrictive.
Yeah.
On a policy level, I worry less about that, because I think that procedurally it creates the options like, Beth outlined, right? Is, you can have celebratory foods that are, when we have celebration foods, they're not always going to be the healthiest options. We just had Thanksgiving, like we all understand this. And it leaves the door open too for foods from different cultures. Like I think that it's widely understood that we're not going to be like putting a microscope under any kind of snack option or like celebratory food option that comes in.
Yeah.
I think that just on a policy level, especially, and I think that first option is the better one, setting the standard that when feasible, just take that pause and think like, if it's somebody's birthday or something, like, and they like a certain kind of cake, bring the cake. But if you're providing
and no one knows what a smart snack is.
Yeah, I was gonna
I
say,
know.
this is a smart snack.
Other than hopefully our food service staff, but they're the only ones that should know it.
Yeah, but
Exactly.
just to finish that thought, like if it's like, oh, I'm bringing in snacks for like students that are doing some sort of active event, then just having that like, hey, think about like what's the most appropriate for that event.
Yeah.
So I think that bullet 1 as it's written makes sense, but I would expect the procedure to be a little bit clearer on how that works, and I don't think it would be overly restrictive. Unless Christina has some plan that I'm not aware of.
No.
That sounds like a good plan to me. I read that.
Okay.
So.
The next policy to kind of quickly go over, school entrance age.
And you did skip the transgender one.
I did.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
on purpose, because we had some legal input that Christine and I are going to input it before we really go over it some more.
So we did, Bill and I, after the last meeting, said we would look at all the suggestions from the Hartford policy. They were highlighted in there. And so we went through it, and I think some board members gave comment. And so the policy is in the portal, the final policy that Bill and I worked on, but we have advice from the lawyer, so we need to make some changes or look through it carefully.
Great.
Yeah.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I requested that you take a look at the new South Burlington policy that you've probably read about in the news. I can send it to you, but I'd love to see some of that kind of incorporated side by side as well. I don't know if
Yeah.
that was in the last month.
I haven't heard about that, Elizabeth. So if you could send it to me, that would be
I
great.
would be glad to.
Okay, thank you.
Elizabeth.
Okay, school entrance age. The only difference I see here, and I could be wrong, is that the September 1st year for 3-year-olds. And I know at Hartford, we sometimes have students who turn 3 mid-year and then get join a universal preschool program. And so that would eliminate that. And my guess is probably a state required thing, but I don't know.
Katie, you worked on this piece, right, with Lori? Do you want to speak to that?
So I think that's different for the universal pre-K program and not the public preschool, which has the entrance age requirements. If I'm not mistaken, let me just pull it up. That's because this is for school, not pre-K, public pre-K, universal pre-K. So this would not apply to, let's say, like Little Susie's Peanuts or Heartland Cooperative. Does that make sense?
No, but that's okay.
Okay. Because I do know, if I'm not mistaken, at Hartford, a student would not necessarily start mid-year, unless they were, and that's why we put the clause in there for early childhood special ed, that those are the only students that sometimes will start based on a student's particular program, or if they've recently moved and we have space. But in general, we keep to the same school age as for public school as September 1st for age 5, September 1st for 3-year-olds, because then it keeps it consistent as kids move through the grades.
Right.
So
no,
that's
I'm not disagreeing with this policy, but
okay.
I guess universal. So basically, universal preschool program is that every student has the ability to go to a public school for preschool.
They have the ability to, but they also have to meet their entrance requirements, just like Heartland Cooperative has their entrance requirements.
Right. Okay. So
that makes sense.
But where does it say that entrance requirements?
It's where the only part of this with the entrance requirements is the age. Oh, she named it Universal Preschool Program. I think that is why that's the confusion. We went back and forth on a few iterations of this. So I think it should into the Windsor Southeast preschool program instead of saying universal. I think when we went back and forth, because this is a policy that we didn't have
right.
in
We
place
made it up.
school age. So that may not have been caught when I was reading it either, Bill.
Okay.
So it should say the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union preschool.
Okay, but
instead
you
of
said
universal.
something about entrance requirements. Is the only entrance requirement an age requirement, or are there other requirements?
For
Okay.
our preschool, the only one is age.
Okay.
So I would change so that for would make sense to take out universal, because we don't have control over that part. I think that because the universal pre-K has their own requirements. For board purposes, I think we should just have it as Windsor Southeast.
So that if just to play devil's advocate for a couple minutes. So, but we would have at least some control because we're paying for private pre-K. Would we be able to require those students, those 3-year-olds, to be 3-year-olds by September 1st?
I would want to double check what the universal pre-K law says.
Okay.
I don't feel secure in answering that, but I can find out.
Well, I'm pretty sure the answer is no. I think we have to follow the actual law. So
I think so too, and I do not think that's in there. I know the requirements for how long you can use those funds. For example, up through past age 6 if they're on a waiver. I mean, there's some nuances to it that I would just want to make sure that there wasn't a nuance in there that I'm not remembering.
Right. So I think that would be neat to know if you want to look into that, or maybe I'll even look into it to see. So thank you, Katie.
Yep.
So for now, the only change is that universal comes out, Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union is added in its place.
Yep.
And Katie will get back to us, or Bill, on the.
Just one really nitpicky question about
Yeah.
that. So in the top line of that statement under policy, this will be the policy of the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union. That seems to be stating that it's preschool that falls under our purview, because we don't say WSESU kindergarten. So do we need to put it before preschool, or can we just remove the word universal? Or does it need to be more descriptive on that line?
You mean just for admission into
the preschool program?
Into the preschool
Because we're already
program.
talking about WSESU at the top line.
I think you're right. I think we don't need it.
It's like
So that
less
comes
words,
out,
if
yeah.
we can do that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Productive night. Moving on from policy, we took much longer than I wanted to, and that's my fault. I will take a motion, and I would ask for help to remember what exactly I'm supposed to say, to go into executive session.
So can you do the,
Set the agenda?
Will you also take action on that resignation?
Oh, that's true. I will take a motion to accept the resignations of
Just one, Nicole Mancino.
Nicole Mancino.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion?
Is there any letter or further context about this resignation?
Yes, I have the letter right here. Somewhere, right here. So it was written to me. This email is formally notifying you that I am resigning from my position as mental health clinician with the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union. It has been such a pleasure and privilege to have the opportunity to support the students of the Windsor Southeast Supervisory Union. As I write this with a heavy heart, I am also holding onto the conviction that I must be in an environment in which the students and I can thrive. And then she goes into a transition time and announces her last day. And thank you for the opportunity. So that's not a lot of information, but that's what she had shared.
Well, it says a lot, but it doesn't. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, clearly she cares for her students, but doesn't feel that she can continue under the circumstances.
I heard none of that, but
I was wondering too, if this is, because we said this is a contracted, not a will employee. So if we needed to discuss that more, I mean, we could in MASD, we could talk about that in executive session just to get a better idea of it, and then vote on the resignation after. Is that?
Could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would, Elizabeth?
Oh, I thought you were gonna move to table
I
the.
was, yes.
Okay, sorry.
I will take a motion to go to executive session
Wait.
to,
Oh, okay. Are we not gonna set the agenda for the next meeting?
Yeah, that's.
sure,
Before we go into executive session.
Okay.
Or do you want to do that after?
okay,
And are we waiting to vote on the?
yes, we
Okay.
are. And thank you, Elizabeth.
We have a request for our next agenda.
Okay,
Just a very brief, Christine,
Yes.
could you just provide us with a very brief update to the changes to Title IX at our next meeting?
I will ask Angie to do that. She's our Title IX coordinator. Is that okay?
Yep.
Just to be clear too about the resignation, did we, and forgive me if I'm misremembering this, did we have a motion to do it and then we were in the discussion portion? So I think we would need to
Exactly.
withdraw that, so.
right.
Can't we stay in with discussion? And,
Do we have to withdraw it before we go into executive session? I just want to make sure we're not.
oh, if you want to, I withdraw the motion.
Okay. All in favor? Well, I will take a motion to withdraw the motion.
You got it. I already moved.
I think you could
Okay.
do that unanimous consent.
I don't think you have to vote.
I don't think you have to vote.
do either.
Okay, okay.
I think we all agree that that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I also think that we can, go into executive session, discuss it and vote afterwards. I don't think the motion actually has to be withdrawn.
Yeah, I didn't.
But I do think we need
I
to
do
set the
whatever
agenda.
I'm asked.
But we have to do another motion or executive session. I don't think two more motions at once.
Did you hear that, Bill?
Not, yeah, no.
Davis, if we have two motions on the table, you can't have two motions on the table.
I'm not an expert, it's just that's been my
Okay.
understanding.
No, that makes more sense to me. So someone was saying we don't have to vote on it?
We just can do unanimous consent on
Okay.
removing
On
the
tabling
motion.
it for
Yeah.
20
Okay.
minutes.
So, are we done with the next agenda? And
So this is what I've got. We've got our Tracy operationalizing diversity, equity, inclusion, administrative report, which will include hopefully the final calendars and procedures and update Title IX changes. And then we've got policy review, which would be the transgender policy, the new community use of school facilities, which would be the third read, local wellness policy second read, kindergarten policy second read. I did have on the work plan English language learners first read, which is C4 and B20, which is recruitment, selection, appointment, and background check, personnel, recruitment, selection, appointment, and background check as a first read. Does that sound okay to you, Bill?
yes.
Okay. I just want to point out that the next board meeting we agreed would be December 18th instead of Christmas Day. So it's a week earlier. Just want to remind everybody of that.
That'd be such a
Christmas meeting.
I was gonna
So it'd be a week early.
Thank you for that.
All right. That's all I had. And Bill, you and I are gonna touch base on curriculum content, presentation
Yes.
and some other policy. We're gonna talk about the community use of school facilities policy
In the
in
transcript.
terms of, yep, in terms of weapons and
Yes.
guns. Okay.
Okay. Are we ready to go to, I will take a motion to go into, executive session to,
So we've got, I have it written down. One VSA 313-2, negotiating or securing a real estate purchase or lease options, and we're also going in for a contract issue.
Yes. Okay, I will take that motion.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay. All opposed, say nay. Okay,
Okay,
going into executive session.
so let me just make sure I turn off the recording.